The first thing Captain Jack Mercer noticed about the island was that there shouldn't have been an island there. The second thing he noticed was that 17 people were alive who had no business being alive at all. Jack stood ankle-deep in the surf, staring back at the wreckage scattered across the beach. Pieces of the Argosy were everywhere. A lifeboat lay upside down among the palms. Crates bobbed in the shallows. A section of the ship's railing had somehow landed nearly 50 yards inland. Behind him, the survivors were beginning to gather themselves. Some were injured, most were exhausted, all were frightened. Jack turned toward the man sitting against a palm tree. "Doctor?" Dr. Samuel Reed looked up. "I'm alive." "Good. That's your medical diagnosis. For now." Reed managed a tired smile. Jack looked down the beach. 17. He counted them again. 17 survivors from a ship that had gone down in the middle of the Pacific without warning. There had been no storm, no reef, no collision. One moment the Argosy had been steaming through calm water. The next, something had struck her from below. Jack could still hear the sound, the terrible groan of metal, the screaming, then the ocean rushing through the lower decks. Whatever had hit them had been powerful enough to tear open the ship's hull, and yet the sea around the island was perfectly calm. Jack looked toward the horizon. Nothing. No smoke, no ship, no rescue. Just endless blue water. He turned toward the jungle. "Well," he muttered, "at least we're somewhere." A voice behind him answered, "Actually, Captain." Jack turned. Professor Elias Finch was holding a soaked navigation chart. "We may not be." Jack stared at him. "Excuse me?" Finch unfolded the chart across the hood of a damaged lifeboat. "I've been checking our position." "And?" Finch pointed toward the ocean. "This island isn't on the chart." Jack looked at the map, then at the jungle, then back at the map. "You're telling me we're standing on an island that isn't supposed to exist?" Finch adjusted his glasses. "Precisely." Jack looked toward the mountain rising beyond the trees. It was enormous, and somehow that bothered him more than the wreckage. "Then I suppose we'd better find out where we are." A distant rumble rolled across the island. Everyone stopped. Jack slowly looked toward the mountain. The sound came again, deeper this time, like something enormous moving beneath the earth. Then silence. Jack reached for his revolver. Nobody goes into the jungle alone. He looked at the others, and until we know what made that noise, his eyes settled on the mountain. Nobody goes near that. They made camp above the beach before sunset. The survivors salvaged what they could: food, blankets, medical supplies, a few firearms, and, most importantly, the radio. Jack crouched beside it while Reed held a lantern. The casing was cracked, the antenna was bent, half the controls were missing. Jack switched it on. Static filled the air. He adjusted the dial. Nothing. Again, nothing. "Give it up," Reed said. Jack shook his head. "The thing survived a shipwreck. That doesn't mean it works. It doesn't know that." Jack adjusted the dial again. Static, then silence, then more static. Jack smiled. "See?" Reed sighed. "You're talking to a radio. I've been at sea a long time. You've been at sea too long." A few of the survivors laughed. For the first time since the wreck, the tension on the beach eased. Then Finch called from the jungle. "Captain!" Jack stood. "What is it?" "Water." That got everyone's attention. They followed Finch inland until they reached a narrow stream running through the trees. Clear water flowed over smooth black stones. Jack knelt and tasted it. Fresh, clean. "Well," Reed said, "perhaps the island isn't completely hostile." Jack stood. "Don't say that yet." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Jack pointed toward the mud beside the stream. There were footprints, human footprints. Everyone crowded around. Finch knelt beside them. "Those aren't ours." Jack studied them. The prints were larger than a man's. The toes were long, and there were 6 of them. Reed stared. "That is impossible." Jack looked into the jungle. Apparently, today is full of impossible things. Something rustled in the trees. Everyone froze. Jack raised his revolver. The leaves moved again, then stopped. Nothing emerged. Jack waited. Finally, he lowered the weapon. "Let's find out where those came from." The tracks continued along the stream. They followed them for nearly 100 yards. Then Jack saw something through the trees. A building. An old wooden hut stood half hidden beneath the vines. The roof had collapsed. The walls were black with age, but the door was still there. Jack approached carefully. He pushed it open. Inside was dust, broken furniture, rusting cans, a collapsed table, and on the floor, half covered by debris, was a metal box. Jack opened it. Inside was a notebook. The cover was faded almost white. Finch picked it up. He stared at the name written across the front. "What's wrong?" The professor didn't answer. Jack took the notebook. The name meant nothing to him, but the date underneath it did. Finch finally spoke. This belonged to the Whitmore expedition. Reed looked at him. "The expedition that disappeared?" Finch nodded. Jack looked around the ruined hut. "Then I think we've just found out where they disappeared to." The notebook was badly damaged. Most of the pages had been ruined by water, but enough remained to read. Finch held the book beneath the lantern while Jack stood beside him. The first readable entry was dated June 3rd, 1927. "We have reached the island." Jack looked up. "Keep going." Finch continued. "It does not appear on any known chart." Jack and Reed exchanged a glance. The next entry was several pages later. "The island contains ruins of unknown origin. Professor Whitmore believes they predate any known civilization in this region." Finch turned another page. The handwriting had become hurried, uneven. "We have discovered an entrance beneath the mountain." Jack frowned. "Entrance?" Finch nodded. The next page was almost completely torn away. Only one sentence remained. "We have decided to open the door." Silence filled the hut. Reed looked toward the jungle. "That sounds like a terrible idea." Jack closed the notebook. It was. A noise came from outside. Everyone turned. Something had stepped on a branch. Crack. Jack raised his revolver. The others reached for their weapons. Another sound. Closer. Jack moved toward the doorway. He looked outside. Nothing. Only trees. He stepped onto the porch. The jungle was completely still. Then he saw the mud beside the stream. The six-toed footprints were still there, but now there were more, a whole trail of them, and they were coming toward the hut. Jack slowly backed inside. "Everyone out." Reed looked at him. "What did you see?" "Nothing." Jack shut the door. "And that's exactly what worries me." They hurried back toward the beach. Nobody spoke until the jungle was behind them. When they finally reached camp, the sun was almost gone. Jack looked toward the mountain. For a moment, he thought he saw something near its peak. A tiny light. It flashed once, then vanished. Jack blinked. "Did you see that?" Reed looked up. "See what?" Jack didn't answer. He turned toward the salvaged radio. The machine suddenly crackled to life. Everyone on the beach went silent. Jack approached it slowly. Static filled the night. Then a voice came through. A man's voice. Calm, clear, and very close. "Captain Mercer." Jack stopped. The voice continued. "Whatever you do," a pause, "do not climb the mountain." The radio went dead. Jack stared at it. Then he looked toward the mountain. For the first time since the Argosy sank, Captain Jack Mercer felt certain of one thing. They were not alone. Morning came hot and bright, but Jack Mercer had little time to enjoy it. He, Dr. Reed, and Professor Finch followed the old trail inland. The six-toed tracks were gone. In their place were footprints from ordinary boots. "Someone's been here recently," Reed said. Jack nodded. The trail ended at a clearing. What they found there stopped them cold. An old expedition camp. Tents had collapsed beneath the jungle. Rusting crates lay scattered among the trees. A cooking stove sat beneath a tree, still surrounded by empty fuel cans. Finch stared. This was Whitmore's camp. Jack kicked open a crate. Inside were scientific instruments, badly corroded but recognizable. How long did they stay? Finch looked around. Long enough to build all this. Jack spotted something half buried beneath a fallen tent. A rifle. He picked it up. The metal was rusted solid. Reed examined the stock. British manufacture, early 20th century. Jack turned it over. Carved into the wood were 3 letters. E. W. Whitmore? Finch nodded. Then he noticed something else. A trail of stone markers led away from the camp, straight toward the mountain. Finch smiled. "We found their route." Jack sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that." They followed the markers. The jungle suddenly ended. Jack stepped into a clearing and stopped. Stone pillars rose from the earth. Broken statues lay beneath the vines. A wide staircase disappeared into the hillside. Finch slowly removed his glasses. "My word." Reed looked around. "You know what this place is?" "No." "That's unusual." "Very." Jack climbed the first step. The stone was worn smooth, not by weather, by footsteps, lots of them. Finch ran his fingers across a carving. It showed a ship, then another, then a third. Each was completely different. Jack pointed. Those ships aren't from the same period. No, Finch said. How old are these? Finch shook his head. I don't know. Jack looked farther up the staircase. That's the first useful thing you've said all morning. They continued upward. At the top stood a massive stone wall. In its center was a doorway. The doors themselves were gone. Beyond them was darkness. Finch stared into it. This civilization knew about navigation. Jack looked back at the carvings. Looks that way. And they had contact with people from far away. Looks that way, too. Finch smiled. Jack frowned. Don't what? Start getting excited. I'm an archaeologist. Exactly. Reed pointed toward the ground. There's something else. Half buried in the dirt was a metal box. Jack pulled it free. Inside was a flashlight. Old, but not ancient. Reed examined it. This wasn't made in the time of the civilization. Finch's smile disappeared. Jack looked toward the doorway. Whitmore. Nobody answered. Jack chambered around. Let's find out what he was looking for. The passage beyond the doorway descended into darkness. Jack lit a lantern. The walls were covered in carvings. Some depicted animals. Others showed people kneeling before strange symbols. And one showed the mountain itself, with a door in its side. Jack stopped. That's our door. Finch nodded. They continued. After several minutes, the passage opened into a large chamber. At the far end stood another stone door. It was enormous, 20 feet high, covered in carvings, and directly beside it was a pile of modern equipment. Ropes, lanterns, food tins, a climbing harness. Finch crouched beside the supplies. Whitmore. Jack looked around. Where is he? Finch pointed. On the wall beside the door was a message scratched into the stone. We go no further. Reed looked surprised. I thought the journal said they opened the door. It said they decided to. Jack examined the door. There was no handle, no lock, no obvious mechanism, just a strange circular symbol in the center. Jack reached toward it. Finch grabbed his wrist. Don't. Jack looked at him. Professor, I'm beginning to think that's your favorite word, because it keeps being necessary. Jack pulled his hand away. Then something echoed through the chamber. 3 slow knocks. Thoom, thoom, thoom. Nobody moved. Reed whispered. That came from the other side. Jack stared at the door. Then the radio crackled. Everyone jumped. Jack slowly reached for it. Static. Then the mysterious voice. Mercer. Jack raised the radio. Who are you? Silence. How do you know my name? The voice answered. Because I know what happened to Whitmore. Jack's expression hardened. What happened? A long pause. Then, turn around. Jack did. There was nobody behind them. The radio went dead. They didn't run. Jack wanted to. Reed wanted to. Finch most certainly did not. The professor was staring at the ancient door. Captain? No. You haven't even heard what I was going to say. You were going to say we should open it. Finch smiled faintly. Yes. Jack shook his head. We don't know what's behind it. Exactly. That isn't an argument. It is to an archaeologist. Jack looked at Reed. You're the doctor. Tell him. Reed considered this. I'm afraid curiosity may be contagious. Jack groaned. Then the mountain trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The great stone door shifted, only an inch, but it was enough. A cold wind rushed through the chamber. Finch stared. Captain. Jack raised his revolver. I know. The door moved again, another inch, then stopped. Jack looked at the ancient carvings, then at Whitmore's abandoned equipment, then at the darkness beyond the door. He picked up his lantern. We go back to camp. Finch stared at him. But we need more supplies. The professor smiled. Jack pointed at him. And nobody touches that door until I say so. They turned toward the passage. Behind them came another sound. Not a knock this time. A scraping sound. Slow. Heavy. Something was moving on the other side. Jack stopped. He looked over his shoulder. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow we find out what's behind that door. The radio crackled one last time. The mysterious voice whispered, That is exactly what Whitmore said.